Je t'aime.
Je t'aime.
Je veux être avec toi.
You're the love of my life.
All Spoiler Recap.
Welcome to the All Spoiler Recap. I'm Julia Cunningham. Our goal each week with the podcast is to go through a movie beat by beat, almost like an audiobook of a film, whether it is, a horror film with a low percentage on Rotten Tomatoes, or maybe a Christmas film, which a lot of people have been requesting. And now that we've made our way past Thanksgiving, it's prime Christmas time. We'll get into our film in just a minute. I'm Julia Cunningham, by the way. I want to welcome our guest, Erica Bowman, who reached out to me, who drives through the state of Arkansas listening to the All Spoiler Recap, which I love. Erica, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited. And I hope my accent is not too much for everyone.
Are you kidding me? I love it. I love having a little flair versus my, shades of mom Midwest accent that gets thrown in on various episodes. But Erica, thank you for joining me. And I just checked. You have been watching some of the Netflix Christmas movies. Have you seen like Hot Frosty yet?
No, that one keeps popping up and I want to watch it because I'm a big Schitt's Creek fan. So
totally. Dustin Mulligan. Yes, exactly. I'm like, anytime like a snowman becomes a hot person, like, sure, I'm all in. And Lacey Chabert, Queen of Christmas, I'm so glad that she's also trotting over into the Netflix world. So, we'll be covering some of these quote unquote incredible Christmas movies. But there was one that I got a lot of reaction to and requests for. Because over on the Jess Cagle Show, which is my day job over at SiriusXM, we call things BAMs, barely a movie. BAM, barely a movie. And I got so many messages being like, you have to see this new Christmas BAM called The Merry Gentleman. And I got so excited. It's a film that stars Britt Robertson, who you might know from the movie Tomorrowland, which was like the George Clooney and like Damon Lindelof type film that was like about the Tomorrowland of Disney World. But it was a movie that came out maybe a decade ago. But I thought I had already misremembered that Britt Robertson was like a child in that. She's not. She's in her 30s, but in my mind, she's like 18. Do you know what I mean? Like when you just are not ready to accept the aging of a young actress or something. So she's actually 34 in real life. But in my mind, I was like, is she 18? Anyways, Britt Robertson stars in this, as does one Chad Michael Murray. He was making headlines because you might remember this is the Christmas movie about strippers. It's The Merry Gentleman.
Strippers, yay!
So excited. Also, it's worth noting that we broke an incredibly important news story years ago on the Jess Cagle Show. It still pops up all the time. We had Chad Michael Murray on our show, and he was talking about when he was 15 years old, he had such an incredible body. He literally had 17 abs, and because of that, he had been in some sort of car accident. And because his abs were so ripped, they were like, you're fine, and sent him home. Meanwhile, his intestines were like all mashed up or something, and he was internally bleeding. He almost died, and it was all because his abs were so beautiful, they had sent him home from the hospital. And you work in healthcare. Is that not the most unhinged story?
Cautionary tale for being too ripped. I guess. Your guts will just fall out.
I hadn't thought about it that way, but that's actually hysterical. Cautionary tale, don't be too hot. It's a medical ailment. So that's a story that pops off all the time. And it recently was popping back off because of said abs in this movie, The Merry Gentleman. Now, it currently sits at 42% on Rotten Tomatoes, but it has a 29% audience score, which is like pretty rough. But I think it's because it's a BAM. It's barely a movie. But let's go ahead and jump in. And I also want to mention, with Love and Light, there isn't even a Wikipedia page for it yet. That's like what we're dealing with. God bless. So the movie begins with really jazzy Christmas music. And we see the beautiful skyline of New York City, baby, with the Empire State Building glowing in red and green. It's obviously Christmas. We get shots of the city, Saks Fifth Avenue all lit up, Astor Place not lit up, and we see a man crossing the street in a way that it's supposed to be like cutting through almost like cloud or something, but really it's probably like car exhaust on a busy street, steam coming up from the road in New York City because it's dirty. And we get the marquee of this theater that says a music note tradition, then the Jingle Bells, Bells, Jingle Bells, a Christmas extravaganza. And we made it just in time, the man exclaims as he and his partner get inside. And the place is packed with people. We cut through the audience to backstage where a stagehand, who is truly giving us Stanley Tucci in burlesque, the stagehand is like, everybody, places, everybody, places for the top of Act 1. And the lights out in the lobby begin to flicker. The cue the show is about to start. And the stagehand smirks towards a particular woman who we can't see. We only see that a row of women are lined up. She has this low bun with a sequined red hair bow. And the stagehand, i.e. Stanley Tucci, but some lady, is like ready to shine with like a smirk, ready to shine. And the woman says, better than ever. And the curtain opens and we get The Merry Gentleman, our title card. And it's all caps. It's red letters, except the word the is smaller. The Merry Gentleman. And it's more of an orange, that first word, the. And the makeup mirrors, you know, like when you're seeing, I'm ready for my close-up, and it's a mirror with the light bulbs around it. It's giving that. It's giving like vanity letters with the light bulbs in each one. And it's I'm not sure if it's intentional or not, but the way the title card is showing us, it's almost blurred a little bit, as if, like, did they unintentionally assume everyone has astigmatism or something? Do you know how the light is coming off of it where it doesn't quite make sense? But the letters are slightly blurred. Go back and look at that moment. And I'm not sure if it's a Netflix budget thing, whatever. Show fonts respect is what I want to say out of that moment. And we get this orchestral version of Joy to the World as our credits roll in, this time all caps, deep textured gold Arial font. And the camera begins to circle around Britt Robertson, not a youth, 34 in real life, as I had misremembered. She was also in this country sort of Christian singer-songwriter movie with KJ Apa that I remember seeing in theaters for lols and thinking I might have to go back and do an all spoiler recap of that movie. But anyways, the music quickly shifts to Jingle Bells, obviously. It's our Jingle Bells-a, as this row of hot women dressed kind of like in the Mean Girls section of the Christmas performance, you know, like tiny, lightly slutty Santa outfits. They start doing a whole Rockette moment where they all have their arms intertwined and they're doing the high kicks. Very Rockette-esque, but also very Thunderstruck from America's Sweethearts, Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders. And we know from that show, these high kicks are, number one, not high enough. And Britt is the shortest one. All these women's hips will be shattered if they try and do a jump line. So
you have to all be the same height.
Okay, honestly, if they had the Dallas Cowboys cheerleader coach there, she would be cutting 90% of them. Kicks not high enough, not in unison. Like, I can't see a woman kick without thinking of Thunderstruck now.
Yes, terrifying.
It's like, show fonts respect, show the high kick line respect. So Britt Robertson in the middle, she is not Reese from America's Sweethearts, the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, but she's giving it her all. And let me just say, they get a standing ovation for these high kicks. People are going wild for this show. The show ends. We see Britt bust through the green door. She's yelling, you know, to everyone, thanks, Bobby. Had so much fun. See you tomorrow. Yelling, 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 yelling. Forgot to return the dress, but I had a great date. The date was a bust. Like, just yelling, making her way through the backstage. A la Christina Aguilera later in the movie Burlesque, you know? It all comes back to the core films. So she goes on and on and on, and a fellow dancer comes up to her and was like, I can't believe I broke my heel. And she goes, I know what I'm going to ask for Santa for Christmas. And Britt says, look, if I'm asking Santa for shoes, they better come with a red bottom. And I'm like, do you not get a replacement shoe? Do you have to buy your own tap shoes?
Yeah, that has to be your Christmas present.
Like, that is so bleak. How much are you guys making? But so, you know, it's that kind of energy, very hustle bustle in the backstage. They're chatting with the stagehand, a woman, i.e. Stanley Tucci, though, who approaches and she goes, Britt, the other lady, whoever you are, this is Shelby, like basically talking to the girl who has a missing shoe, a broken shoe. And Britt, this is Shelby. She's joining the show next week. We're super excited about it. And the actress in real life is only in this sort of brief scene or two. Her name is Bella Shepherd. She was in the series Wolfpack, which I'm sure a number of our listeners were super into, which was on Paramount Plus. She has a pretty big following on the thing called the internet. But more importantly, she was in a short film called Green Fingers, which, you know, anytime it's like gold finger, green fingers, that's apparently she was in a film called that. So immediately she swoons over Britt Robertson, who is our powerful leader of the kick line, of the Jingle Bells. She's immediately like, oh my God, Britt, like I saw you dance when I was a little girl. You are a legend. I can't believe I'm going to be on this stage. And Britt is not warm, but she's just sort of like, oh, like, thank you. That's so nice. But a little curt, not like reaching out to hug her. Just, you know, oh, thank you. And the stagehand sort of fills them in. This Stanley Tucci-esque woman says, well, she just graduated from the Royal Ballet School. They're like, oh, wow, that's really impressive. That's so cool. And this young green finger Shelby says, yeah, I was just thinking, like, you know, I think it's so cool that you guys have been doing this for all of these years. Do you have any advice for a newbie? And of course, the girl with the broken heel is like, all of these years? And Britt,
how dare you? I'm not old.
Exactly. It was very like, oh my God. And Britt turns to her, is like, oh my God, be nice. And she's like, you know what? It's so nice to meet you. Let me think about it in terms of advice. Like, let me think about it. And so they're starting to walk away, and the stagehand, a la the Stanley Tucci of the whole thing, is walking Shelby off, and then she turns and says, oh, by the way, Jody wants to speak to you, Britt. So can you catch up with her before you leave? And she's like, kind of got this like, oh, okay, huh. But sure. By the way, the credits are just wrapping up in this moment, and we get our directed by Peter Sullivan. And we flow past a desk that includes chocolates and papers and flowers, and it's giving big boss energy, that she's very Christmas-oriented, but also a woman who means business. And she gets down to this woman, Jody, who is an actress named Meredith Thomas. And if you're in the whole world of Lifetime movies, she starred in, quote, The Wrong series, brought to Lifetime from Vivica A. Fox. So there was like The Wrong Boy Next Door, The Wrong Date, The Wrong Bachelor Party. It's like a whole series of movies. And she's basically starred in every single one. And Britt, now in her street clothes, changed out of her slutty Santa costume, has made her way into the room. She closes the door and she puts her backpack down, and she immediately starts with like, Jody, if this is what happened with tonight, like I lost my footing and, you know, my kick line could have been better. And, you know, just immediately being like, oh, she's chastising me for something that I did wrong in my Thunderstruck-esque performance. And she says, it will never happen again. And Jody immediately puts her hand up. She's like, Britt, you have been a vital part of the Jingle Bells for over 12 years.
Oh, she's ancient.
She's so old. It's like disgusting. Is this The Bachelor? How old are you? And this is 12 years. Gross. So she's like, look, we are forever grateful for your meaningful contribution. And meaningful contribution is like, uh-oh. And you can see Britt's face change, like, meaningful contribution. She goes, however, with any long-running show, we must keep things from getting stale, which means periodically refreshing the cast with new faces. And Britt immediately says, are you aging me out? She's like, oh my God, no, of course not. That would be illegal. We're just simply replacing you.
Same effect, same end result,
yeah,
but
exactly.
Different. We're calling it something different.
She's like, I'm just not saying you're old AF, even though you're like 34. She goes, Jody, please, I've dedicated my life to this show. Could you please just let me finish the season, you know, like for old time's sake? And there's this quiet no from Jody. Not even like an ounce of energy, just like, no. She's like, okay, in that case. And she gets up, she takes it like a champ. She shakes Jody's hand. She says, Merry Christmas. Jody says, Merry Christmas. And she starts walking out the door. And you know who's on the other side of the door? Green fingers. Shelby standing on the other side of the door. She takes out her Christmas bow, Britt does, and she hands it to Shelby, a used Christmas bow. And she goes, you want advice? Don't get old.
Best advice ever.
She then steps out as Shelby walks in and closes the door, and it's this moody hallway, and Britt throws her body up against the door and is like, ah! Just screams. She goes home and immediately puts on a Netflix property of Christmas. She puts on a Christmas Prince, and she sits by her tree and her oversized Christmas-themed pillows, and she just Christmases out, even though she lives that in her former job and her former life. And then she turns it off in a huff, like, too much. She gets a phone call from home. We see on her iPhone, Mom. And it's not just Mom. It's Zelda from Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which is so exciting. Such a good
Amazing
throwback.
mom.
I know, an amazing
Yes.
mom. She calls and is like, is it too late to call? And she's like, okay, good. You know, I know you're busy with the show this time of year. So you know what? Your father and I decided that we were going to come and visit you. And she's like, what? She's like, your father already bought the tickets. We'll come see you. We got tickets to see the Jingle Bells on Christmas Eve. How great is that? And there's just silence on the end of the phone. She's like, honey, are you there? And Britt says, you know what, Mom? Maybe it's time for me to come home and to visit you. So we cut to Britt Robertson emerging out of a van cab, paying cash, a foreign entity in the world of paying for cars, cash. And she's wearing a green braided winter beret and outside of a venue. This is where she literally pulls up and gets out of the cab. And hanging garland outside of the venue is one abs for days, Chad Michael Murray. And he's not like One Tree Hill, Chad Michael Murray. He's aged in a way where he does look a little bit more like worn in. You know, he's aged in that way where he's got like the scruff and he's got some like deep set wrinkles, but in a way that makes you look like a lumberjack. And he's got like a little bit more grown out hair and it's thick. So it's sort of like he looks lumberjack-esque in flannels, etc. Chad Michael Murray.
Yeah.
And she's, of course, swept up and not paying attention and looking on her phone and probably texting her mom like, I'm here about how terrible Shelby is. And she's getting messages from everyone back home being like, we miss you. So she's all wrapped up in her phone when, oh my God, what's happening? She's walked right into Chad Montgomery and the garland. She gets all wrapped up like it's a giant snake. It's like the Britney snake at the VMAs. It is somehow wrapped up in her. They get completely tangled, which of course only makes it worse. I mean, what's happening? She gets all wrapped up and she keeps going and then he's trying to pull it and they're basically having the cutest meet cute of all time. And they get wrapped up face to face in this garland. And she finally is like, let go. And he lets go. And she spins out of it and falls to the ground. They both giggle like, oh, that was crazy. How was that even physically possible to get that wrapped up in garland? She ends up standing up and she's like, oh my God, that was crazy. And he's like, that's crazy. And she goes, okay, well, bye. Nice to meet you, LOL. And she goes inside. And inside is not only the sort of local Christmas dive bar, but it also has a stage and it's called the Rhythm Room. And we learn that Zelda from Sabrina the Teenage Witch and Michael Gross, aka Mr. Keaton from Family Ties, are her parents. Living for the casting.
This together. Gosh.
It's so good. God, Netflix, you're on it. And they're her parents, and they say it's a Christmas miracle that she's home. And we learned that her parents, no, it wasn't like she kept it a secret. It's not some plot line of her being like, I have a job. They know she's no longer in the Jingle Bells and, she's happy to be home. And it's clearly been a long time from her coming home because obviously every Christmas for 12 years, she's doing the Jingle Bells. She's not going home. She's performing. And we meet sort of the local hot bartender and a local patron who's played by Maxwell Caulfield, cool writer from Grease 2, Rex Manning from Empire Records.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to be singing that song for the rest of the day.
Oh my God. I love it. All of it is so good. And as they're all standing around and she's meeting the bartender and the bar patron, this fancy she la la woman walks in with a winter white coat, full blowout, and greets Britt in a way that it's like clearly she's met her. And she's like, oh, I need to speak to my tenants, aka Britt's parents. They run the bar. And her parents walk back with the she la la landlord. And she kind of walks around and is just taking it in. It's clear that she hasn't been in the rhythm room in a long time. And she's looking at, the stage, and she walks over to the wall and she sees photos of patrons and photos of her as a little girl up on the stage and all these newspaper articles about how it was the coolest venue of all time. It was like Madison Square Garden or the Troubadour, but it's the rhythm room. And there's even a moment from the Princess Switch where, the Princess Switch from Belgravia had attended a rock fest at the small town venue. That's how powerful. It's as if, Prince Charles and Camilla hit up the rhythm room when they're in the United States. That's how powerful this venue that holds probably 100 people is.
Why did she ever leave home?
Why did she leave home?
I mean,
good question. She goes to get a glass of water and it just explodes water everywhere. And we learn from her parents as they come up and she's like, what's going on? Like, why is this not the upkeep? What's going on with this pipe? We learn that the she la la landlord is maybe shades of evil and keeps raising the rent. And they don't have money to fix things. And I'm like, so is the landlord a slumlord? I mean, isn't that her job to be taking care of those sort of things? And they say, look, the acts aren't coming in anymore and times have changed and bands want to play bigger places. But what's really nice is this local guy that we know has been really good about helping us with repairs. And even though we're on hard times right now, don't worry about it. Like, we're going to survive. In walks Chad Michael Murray. That's right. You know who that really helpful, nice guy that fixes things for free? It's Chad Michael Murray. And he's like, oh, is that the pipe that's giving you problems? And she's like, oh, let me guess. This is the nice guy that helps you out. And they're like, yeah, do you know Chad Michael Murray? And she's like, oh, yeah, we kind of met outside. And she's like, standing there clearly with Zelda and Mr. Keaton. And Chad Michael Murray is like, oh, do you know them? And they're like, oh, my God, this is our daughter, our youngest daughter from the big city. She lives in New York. And he's like, oh, New York. Well, that explains that. Nice to meet you, city girl.
what town are they in?
Where
What
are
state
we?
are they in?
And why is he giving her that judgment? Because she was on her phone when she walked into the Garland? Like, you met her 10 seconds ago. Why are you already judging her for being from the big city? The mom, Zelda, immediately is like, well, he's cute. She's like, he's annoying. She goes, he's available. She puts her hands over her head and is like, fa la 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 la, as she walks out like, I'm ignoring you. And then like trips on spilled water as he's working on the sink. It's just like, she was like, let me do some physical comedy. I am hilarious. She goes to visit her big sister, who's working at the Little Spoon, aka the local diner. She and her husband have bought it. They run it. Her husband is named Roger. Apparently, he was like the high school football star. They met after high school. They dated. She loves to bake cookies, so they bought the diner together? Question mark, exclamation point. Whatever. So they start talking about the rhythm room. And she's like, I can't believe mom and dad didn't tell me how much it was struggling. And I feel really bad. And I didn't know. And the sister is like, look, if bands, they don't want to play like 100-person venue. They want to do like a 30-second TikTok. And it's like, okay, in theory, but also no, bands will play wherever. They make money touring and they make money selling merch. Like, yes, they will come play your stupid rhythm room. Don't blame TikTok. But her brother-in-law brings out this giant oversized cookie because her older sister is experimenting with a new recipe that involves crushed candy canes over a giant chocolate chip cookie. And Britt attempts to unhinge her jaw and place this entire cookie, genuinely the width of an iPhone, into her mouth. So, of course, she looks like a beast trying to eat it, and there is just frosting everywhere. And just like, take a small bite. Are you trying to commit suicide via choking? What is happening? It's all over her face. And of course, you know who's standing there witnessing the entire embarrassing moment? Hey, city girl. Guys, it's Chad Michael Murray. And she turns with her giant cookie face and is literally like, stunned that he's there. Also, like, so embarrassed because she has just frosting everywhere. And by everywhere, I mean like 2 spots. And her sister is like, oh my God, this is so great. Chad, do you mind giving my sister a ride home? And she's like, oh my gosh, I can use my rideshare app. Who calls it that? Uber, Lyft. She's like, I can use my rideshare app. And they, of course, all laugh. They're like, ha, 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 rideshare app? This is Sycamore Creek. We don't have that here. Okay, it's a small town, city girl. She goes, well, I don't have my food yet. And then, of course, here comes Roger slamming down her to-go bag with a salad. She's like, okay, then. He's like, come on, city girl. So they get into his giant oversized truck and he starts driving her home. She'll be staying with her sister. And she's like trying to make small talk. And she's like, so how long have you been like carpentering or whatever you call it? And he's like, oh, I've never heard it like called that. That's hilarious. He's like, well, my dad was a general contractor. And he's like, what do you do? And she's like, oh, I'm a dancer. And he's like, wow, a dancer? She's like, not that kind of dancer, Chad Michael Murray. Okay, I'm on Broadway. It's called the Jingle Bells. Then he goes, oh, so you're a diva. And she's like, I'm a jingle bell. I'm not a diva, but I'm currently on hiatus. And he's like, oh, okay. And then she goes, why do you help my parents so much? Like, that's so nice of you. And he goes, well, you know, I've been like kind of just helping them for years now. When I first moved here, I didn't know anyone and I loved going to the rhythm room and I thought it was so much fun and your parents were always so nice and they made it feel like home. And so I just started helping them. And I'm like, whatever. Anyways, she thanks him for the ride. They say goodnight. She collects her multiple suitcases out of the car and her salad and she steps right inside to her sister's home. And Gizmo, the tiny dog that looks like a teddy bear, greets her. It's really cute. And her house, the sister's house, is like a mini shrine to her. There's all these like newspaper articles framed and like all this stuff of like small town girl makes it big in the big city. But also it's like, okay, you made Chad Michael Murray drive her home, which obviously in some sort of forced meet cute situation. But the sister beat her home. She was like, we have to close up the diner. And yet, how is it that Roger and the sister are already home playing with Gizmo and you just arrived with Chad Michael Murray?
Took the long way.
Yeah, like what is going on with this time machine that you have? And she says, you know, I feel like mom and dad wanted me to stay in beautiful Sycamore Creek and perform always, you know, at the rhythm room. But you know, I had to follow my dreams. And the older sister's like, of course. And I think they wanted you to do that, but I think they just wanted you to visit more. And it's like, yeah, just because you can't go home at Christmas, go home in the beautiful summers of Sycamore Creek or whatever. Be involved. Then, of course, her sister immediately says, so, how's Chad Michael Murray? What do you think? And Britt is like, you know what? Newsflash, women no longer just need a male companion to solidify their happiness, okay? I don't know if you know, but we can also vote now. And his sister laughs and is like, look, I just want you to be happy. And she goes, look, the show was more than a job. It was my everything. I lived for it. I didn't have time to date. And the sister's like, well, now you do, though. Then she's like, what about the guys in the show? Could you have dated them? And it's like, well, what? There were no guys. It was the Jingle Bells. Did you even see the show? Do you know anything about it? But she says, no, there were no guys. She goes, I went on this date with like, a couple guys, but nothing has really come together. And I want to date like a real guy, like the way that you had dated that doctor right before Roger. And the sister, which, yeah, by the way, exactly. So rude to Roger. He runs a local business. Poor Roger. Someone with a real job. So rude.
He made that huge cookie. God.
He didn't even laugh in your face like Chad Michael Murray when you smeared it all over and tried to bite it with an unhinged jaw.
And then she didn't even take it with her. She just took a salad.
Idiot.
Ridiculous.
So they sit on the couch and her sister all of a sudden goes, yeah, so remember, that doctor that I dated? So he wasn't really a real doctor. This goes in the vault, okay? He wasn't a real doctor. And she's like, he wasn't a real doctor. She goes, he just played one at bachelorette parties. And she's like, you dated a stripper? And she goes, well, he was a doctor stripper.
They're all doctor strippers.
Exactly. It was like either a cop or a doctor. You pick one. And so they're laughing. They're like, that's hilarious. And Roger comes out and is like, what are you talking about? And they're like, it's in the vault. Don't worry about it. And they try and go on. And covered up from Roger, the small business owner. And the next day, Britt goes to the rhythm room and she starts being super nosy. She starts like looking through their mail. And of course, all of them is like, mail is past due. Bills are due. Giant stamp of past due on every single letter. And as she approaches the bar, up pops Chad Michael Murray, shirtless, fixing the faucet. And he's like, well, my shirt got wet, so I was letting it dry, and I needed to expose my 70,000 abs to you. I don't know if you know, but I almost died when I was 15 because my abs were so effing awesome that they covered up that I was internally bleeding inside. That's how hot I am.
So hot.
He finds his flannel, puts it on, and she turns on the faucet and is like, wow, it is working. So he's also talented, okay? And she helps him like put his tools away. And of course, it's a classic like teamwork makes the dream work type energy between them. And as there's obviously a big flirt happening in the moment, in walks evil she la la landlord / slumlord and is like, are your parents around? And Britt's like, oh, they haven't gotten here yet. Can I help in any way? And she's like, well, I would like to speak to them privately. And she's like, no, you can tell me. She's like, well, I know they've been really stressed, but I actually have good news. Squeeze me. And Britt's like, what? Squeeze me? What? No, what? What are you saying? And she's like, no, squeeze me, the juice bar. I spoke to their regional manager last night, and he is willing to take over your parents' lease as of January 1st, and he's also going to do their entire backlog of payments. And she's like, so you're saying the good news is that you're going to take away my parents' business from my parents? Which also, like, should you be allowed to expose that? I mean, should you be just airing that business in front of Chad Michael Murray and his abs and Britt? And she goes, well, I think it would be good news because it would cover everything. 6 months of back rent. It would cover all the maintenance that needs to get done, the repairs, the interest. Your parents owe $30,000. And I'm like, $30,000? That's honestly not a lot of money. Okay? Like, that means like rent is $4,000 a month. It's like, what are you talking about? They should have said $300,000.
Yeah, something completely impossible.
Because not to be like whatever, but 30, like, can't you just take out a loan to cover that? I don't know. It seems insane that it's only $30,000. My husband was having a meltdown that it was only $30,000. He was like, I'm going to buy the rhythm room. The rent is only $4,000 a month. So the rhythm room is a staple. And she's like, you can't shut it down. And the Shishi La La landlord / slumlord is like, look, it was a staple, but now it's just another hole in the wall with too many holes in the walls and no customers. And you don't need new acts. You need a doctor because this place is on life support.
Stripper
Brit,
doctor.
literally, Brit, standing right in front of the Neon Rhythm Room sign, is literally hears her sister saying, he wasn't exactly a doctor. And she's like, wait, that's it. She basically says to no one / everyone. She goes, a male dance revue. It's going to be a Christmas spectacular. It's going to be full of hot and up-and-coming men. And, oh my God, here's one now. And in that moment, of course, Chad Michael Murray, in all of his grand hotness, walks right in. And she's like, you know, the Christmas spectacular that you're going to help me with to save my parents, the dancing and singing, it's going to be spectacular. And he's like, oh, yeah, I guess so. Of course. Yeah, I'm totally in. And then the Shishi La La evil landlord / slumlord is like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. Like, does this dance review have a name? Like, I want to come to the premiere of it. And she goes, we all thought, even though the movie is called The Merry Gentleman, we were like, jingle balls. It was right there,
It's
Netflix.
right there. Yeah, it's right there.
Jingle balls. And yet they call it The Merry Gentleman. That was what came right off the top of her head, The Merry Gentleman. And she's like, I love that. So she leaves, and immediately Chad Michael Murray is like, wait, what? What's happening? What did I disagree to? And she's like, look, they're going to evict us. I panicked. I think this could really work. And he, of course, is like, we're not going to do this. This is insane. What are you talking about? And he's like, look, I don't think you've been accustomed to hearing this because you're a diva, but I'm saying no. And she tells him, look, I haven't really been around this place, and it's been a few years, but people used to be really excited about this place. It had a special energy. We can do this. We just need to do something exciting to get interest up again, and I think this is it. And he's like, so stripping? She's like, no, a male review. Naked? She's like, well, shirts off. And he's like, no. She goes, look, I have until Christmas to raise $30,000 or the rhythm room gets ripped away from my parents, and I can't let that happen. Please help me. You know what else you could do? Start a GoFundMe and go hit up the Belgravia Princess and Prince.
Sure.
Think of all the magical people and all the musicians in the past that have passed through there that would throw in a couple of bucks. Anyways, there's a big sigh from Chad Michael Murray. She's like, ready to get your dance on? So she goes, we have 10 days to do this. We have a few days of rehearsal. We're launching. We have Chad Michael Murray. Who else? We have the bartender who's really hot. He seems cool, shirtless. We're going to have him. And we're going to have Roger, my brother-in-law, also do it because he's a small business owner and he's not busy leading up to Christmas. Don't worry about it.
Oh no, what does even Roger look like?
Roger's handsome. He is not Chad Michael Murray jacked, but will work in this occasion. The bartender, handsome as hell / hot bod. So, you know, they're at least like, they're bringing it. She's like, let's get started. She is, of course, the choreographer. And it's like, step and turn, touch feet together, step and turn, step to the left. And so she's doing all sorts of things. And then she's chanting to the men, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, isolate, 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 where the men pump their chest. They continue to work on the choreographer. At one point, Roger is carrying Gizmo the dog in a baby carrier. The bartender is shimmying. They're all trying to convince Cool Rider himself, Maxwell Caulfield, to join them. He's laughing. He's like, I'm not getting involved in your reindeer games as he's doing crossword puzzles and drinking. And they all continue to practice their moves, even in everyday life. Chad Michael Murray doing construction, 1, 2, 3, 4. Bartender shimmying and shaking his chest while he's serving drinks. Roger also dancing and sashaying while he's cooking behind the stove. He's doing it all.
Dangerous. All
And the
things.
sister is, of course, helping out with various costumes, and she's measuring Chad Michael Murray and his beautiful chest. And at one point, Britt is like, eyes up here, okay? Because she's just staring at that bod. And after, Chad Michael Murray sits down at the end of the stage. And he's like, I just feel like I'm useless at that. She's like, hey, you're not. You're really good. You're just anticipating the moves too much. You have to remember, you've got to connect to the audience. You've got to stay focused. And she gets him to stand up and she's like, let's dance together. She's like, this is like one hand and this is two hands. And you put your shoulder back and you widen your legs. And she's like, don't look at your feet. And then they dance and hold hands together. And it's really coming together. And you can just feel the sexual chemistry just exploding between them. They're obviously falling in love. And yet no one is making a move. Zelda from the Sabrina Teenage Witch and Mr. Keaton walk in. They're loving it. They're almost like, I can't even look. It's like looking at a train wreck or the sun. It's so bright, their love. I can't even see them dancing together. It's too much. They're like, okay, remember, for tomorrow, have fun. You got this. It's our first night. We'll like roll with the punches. And she says, remember, connect with the audience. You're here for them. You got this. We cut to the outside sign, December 15th, the Merry Gentleman debut, 7 p.m., $30 cover. Inside, as people begin to gather, the bartender, Roger, Chad Michael Murray, they're all in construction outfits. And Chad Michael Murray is breathing in and out of a paper bag. He's literally hyperventilating. His abs are going, he's breathing. He's trying to calm his nerves. She's like, what's going on? He's like, I can't do this. She's like, look, this is pre-show jitters. You got this. Okay, come on. He's like, what if I freeze up? She goes, I'm going to let you in on a showbiz trick. Just look at the audience and find a friendly face and focus on their smile and their good energy and then funnel it into your performance. He starts breathing more calmly because you know who his person is? Britt Robertson, okay? He doesn't need the audience when he has beautiful Britt in his corner. And then he says to her, you look pretty. And she's like, thanks. 15 minutes of showtime. And she ushers him along. She goes, you'll be great, I promise. Let's go. Out in the audience, there are 20 people.
Whoa.
They start using partial buckets as drums. It's very like YMCA Village People feeling. They're dancing, of course. There's slightly dark lighting. They're showing off their bods. The 20 women are screaming, though. Even the landlady is super into it. She's clapping along. At one point, they like pull Christmas lights out of their buckets and throw them down to the women. They start stripping. Chad Michael Murray exposes a pair of underwear that says Naughty Elf. There's a lot of flexing and body rolls, and the women are loving it. The landlady, Shishi Lala landlady / slumlord, congratulates everyone, and especially Britt. She's like, you know what? You really did something great. And I thought this was going to be a total wash, but you are really on to something. And that Chad Michael Murray, you're a star. She even hands him her slumlord card and is like, call me.
What? Her
parents announce they have not made that much money in a single night in years.
Or 20 whole people there.
20 people there. I'm like, you're still a dive bar. How is it that no one was going? What have you been doing that no one's going to this only dive bar in the neighborhood? Where are the town drunks? Where is everybody?
The alcohol.
Where are the underage kids? Where is everyone? 20 people. It's insane. Chad Michael Murray makes a toast and he's like, to Britt. Because he obviously is way in love. All of a sudden, by the way, what was the
All
turning
in.
point? It was like city girl, and now he's like, "Rawr, I love her."
But now he's too big for her. He's big time.
Totally. He's big time. And he says, this is for Britt for taking a chance on a guy who didn't even want to and want to do this and take it seriously, but you pulled this whole thing together in a short amount of time, and it's incredible. And you taught us choreography too. And they're all like, for Britt! And then her sister like grabs Roger and is like, we got to get home. I'm banging you. That was so hot. Then out of nowhere, Chad Michael Murray is like, I have a gift for you. He pulls Britt aside and he hands her a box. She opens it and it's a necklace of a wreath. And he's like, I'll be forever grateful for that garland, that wreath that pulled you into my life.
Ugh.
She's like, oh my God. And then he helps her put the necklace on and he holds her shoulders. She's like, it's stunning, she says. And then they're like, it's such a nice night. Should we walk home? And she's like, only if we can get something to eat first. I'm starving. So they leave. Meanwhile, I'm like, did they close the bar at 8 o'clock? Like, what time is it?
They didn't hang around or
They
anything.
get a slice of pizza and he's like, what did you think? She's like, this is the second best pizza behind New York City. And he's like, city girl.
Ugh.
So then he's like, tell me, have you been married? Do you have a boyfriend? She's like, none of the above. And he's like, well, just so you know, I was married for a while, but it ended in complete disaster. But one good thing that came out of it was Sycamore Creek. I moved here for her, and it's the best place, and I love it so much. And she's like, oh, wow. She's like,
I thought
that's
he was going
really
to have a surprise
cool.
child or something.
I know. To be like, here's my
Get out of it.
daughter.
This is my kid.
No.
No.
His wife is Sycamore Creek. Okay. That's how much he loves it.
Mm.
City girl. She goes, you know, and they're talking about Christmas and he's like, what do you wish for? And she's like, I wish I knew what to ask for or who to ask for. And he goes, hold that thought. You focus on the what. I know the who. He's like, come on. And then he literally takes her to the town Santa Claus. Again, what time is it? Is it like midnight? Is it 6 p.m.? We have no idea. And he tells her that she's long overdue. And then she sits on Santa's lap. So does
No.
Chad Michael Murray. They put on their Santa hats and they do their ho, ho, ho. And they get their photo with Santa.
At midnight.
Midnight, unknown time. And also like wearing the weird Santa hats that everyone else has worn, just asking for lice. Like, what's going on here? So they continue on and she tells him she was always in the spotlight and she always wanted to perform, but watching the guys and how far they've come, it was unexpected to her. It was so fun. She loved like being the choreographer. And he says, well, Britt, when one door closes, another one opens. Really moving moment between them. At the bar, she makes a holiday-themed board to keep track of the money, and they've climbing to $30,000. They've got a little wreath around it, inspiration, love moment. The first night brought in $2,200, so $110 each, basically. And she looks back on her hard work. She probably spent days making this board, by the way. Like, I don't know, do something else with your time.
Yes. How much did that even cost? Don't waste the money.
What was the
man.
cost of that? And she says to herself, we just might pull this thing off. I'm like, are you? You have like 5 days to get this done. You only made $2,000. But Zelda's blown away. They decide to start selling cookies and Yule logs. There's a baking montage of them making the logs, and they make a single one. I'm like, well, there's only 20 people, so I guess, yeah, you only need one.
Those people have already seen the show. It's like, no, it's over.
Yeah, they're not going again. So they head to lunch to, of course, the local diner. She's like, Mom, why didn't you tell me about the rhythm room? She's like, I didn't want you to worry about it. You know, we're just a dinky hole in the wall. And she's like, Mom, it's not. Okay, it was a huge part of me. She's like, I can't imagine it going away. We have to fight. And she says, you know what? It's not about performing. It's who you're performing for. And I'm so glad you're here. Her sister then approaches and is like, oh my God, you guys, there's a fresh review in the local paper about how incredible the male review was and how it's enhanced Sycamore Creek. They're calling it a huge hit. And her mom's like, even if this doesn't work, everyone's talking about the rhythm room and you're putting us back on the map. Randomly, as they're sitting there at the diner, all just in the glow of this incredible newspaper article, the local Sycamore Creek paper, the cab driver who drove her from the airport to Sycamore Creek is in the diner going to pick up food, and he's dancing wildly, borderline like a robot. So, of course, she goes up to him and is like, oh my God, Ricky, do you remember me? You drove me here. I have a male review. We need you. And tonight is, quote, rhinestone night. So everyone has cowboy hats and rhinestones.
Oh my gosh.
Vests and jeans on. And somehow all of the women in the audience are wearing cowboy hats, like they got the memo. And somehow everyone learns all the choreography in the afternoon. And the show continues on, and we get this montage of more dancing and stripping and even Chippendales style bow ties. And now they're doing flips and they're climbing chairs and they're getting wild to a song called I Want a Man for Christmas. They're thriving, they're living, they're laughing, they're loving. It's just becoming a huge success. And now the shows are selling out. It's no longer 20, it's like 40, 50. And we see sort of over that montage, the room just filling.
It's the rhinestones, I think.
I think it's that. I think it's the low budget Chippendales quality to it, all of it. But on this particular night, Roger slipped and fell on the ice, and he has a severe sprained ankle. And they're all like, what are we going to do? Chad Michael Murray cruises the crowd. He's like, we need 4 dancers to do our routine, but they don't have the time to try and find how we rework it for it to only be 3. They also don't really see anyone, of course, like in the audience who would be able to learn choreography in 6 minutes. So they're like, the show has to go on. And somehow, even though they're only missing a person and they're just doing like borderline simple choreography, they cannot figure it out. They're running into each other. They're missing their cues. Chad Michael Murray grabs the mic and is like, stop the music! All hysterical. And they run outside and he's like, do we give them a refund? What do we do? We can't go on. I'm losing it. They're depending on us. We've got to make this money. The rhythm room. In walks Maxwell Caulfield. Cool Rider himself / Rex Manning. And he's like, guys, I know the choreography. Do you think I'm just doing crossword puzzles and guzzling beer all day? And they're all like, yeah. And he's like, no, I've been studying. I'm ready. I'm going to all about Eve Roger. I'm in it. He jumps in and he dances. Truly, he's got to be.
He has to. I mean,
he might be in his 60s.
Grease too, and
yeah, that was the 80s. Like he's probably in his 60s. Okay. Someone in your own time, do your own Google search of Maxwell Caulfield. Okay. Exactly. So he, he jumps in. He saves the day. They're up to $16,000 now. Let's go. More dancing, more stripping, etc. They're even interviewed on the local news. They, of course, are praising Britt. Anytime Chad Michael Murray can be like, Britt, he does, because he's obviously madly in love. And they're watching from the diner, and the random bartender tells Britt, he's like, I've got to say, Chad Michael Murray, like, I've never seen him this happy. It's been such a long time since I've seen him with a smile on his face and this kind of energy. He was destroyed when Amy left him. And she's like, oh, I didn't she left him? And he's like, oh, yeah, he didn't tell you. And she's like, well, he did say that it ended in disaster, but, and he's like, yeah, that sums it up. They moved here, they got settled. He started his incredible business. And then she changed her mind and was like, I'm moving to the big city. Oh my God, he lived in a big city? And the bartender's like, yeah, he's from Chicago, but like, doesn't like the big city. He loves Sycamore Creek. It's like, we know. Shut up about it already. Okay. It's the worst part of a personality when you're like obsessed with that.
Well, she's jealous of the town.
Totally. She's like, stop
Doesn't care
banging
about
the
the
town. Bang me. But she is like, wow. So that's why he's all big city, this, that. So as they're sitting there, her big sister's like, oh, I have his lunch. Why don't you go deliver it to him? So she goes and takes Chad Michael Murray his lunch. And he's in his barn, which is his, like, quote, office where he does his woodworking and other things. And she delivers him a ham and Swiss on rye. It's like, you can't make that yourself. You went and purchased that and had a delivery of it?
Can't have any carbs. His abs.
You can't.
No, he gets like a celery stick.
A single almond.
That's it.
Like in The Devil Wears Prada when she counts out the 8
Yes.
almonds in the beginning. And he says, he's like, usually Roger delivers my food. Like, what's going on? And she's like, oh, I'm helping. And she's like, what are you working on? She pulls back this sheet. And it's this giant piece of wood. I don't know what it's supposed to be. A table, a headboard. I have no idea. But on the side of it are trees carved into it. And she is like, bang me. I've never seen something so incredible like woodworking done by your bare hands and those abs. And he's like, I'm just so moved. I'm just so inspired right now. Look at all this wood I've made. There's all these random, like, wood legs everywhere. So you're making hundreds of wood legs? What is going on in this barn? And he says, want to dance? And she's like, remember how? And then they take their hands and they dance. And he rests his chin on her forehead. And then they look into each other's eyes and they dance and they're having such a moment. And as they dance, they start hearing on the radio this weird non-cover of a song called All I Want for Christmas Is You, which, like, can that legally be called that? I don't know. But they kiss, finally, amongst all of the weird wood legs that he's made, and maybe a headboard with trees on it, or a table, it's unclear. And then she says, because they're both like, oh my God, I can't believe we just kissed. She's like, your sandwich might get cold. And then he's like, well, your sister might worry. She's like, you're right, I better go. See you tonight? He's like, see you tonight. And as she walks out, he sort of twirls as she walks away. That night in the dressing room, she's looking at his stripper tool belt, and she's like, God, he's hot. She's looking up at the Christmas board that she made, and they're at $23,000. She's like, we are so close. And in that moment, the phone rings. Ba-ding! Guys, it's Jody. She picks up and she's like, this is a surprise. What's up? And Jody's like, 911 emergency. We need you back immediately. Shelby burned out. She's like, well, what about her understudy? And she's like, she's down with the flu Rona.
What?
Flu Rona? What are you talking about? And she's like, are you being serious? And she's like, you're the only one that knows the routine. She's like, well, won't the audience be upset with my disgusting gray hair? Meanwhile, of course, she looks flawless and beautiful. And she goes, well, normally, no, she doesn't say that, but she's like, I convinced the producers that they made a huge mistake in letting you go. I'm like, Jody, you could have fought for her. And she goes, to make it up to you, they want to offer you a 25% raise. She's like, 25%? She's like, plus a 3-year contract. She's like, wow. I mean, that is a tempting offer. And she's like, well, what do you say? And she's like, oh, I don't know. Like, could I say no? I'm not sure. And she goes, look, I'll get you a first-class ticket for tomorrow night. We need you for the Christmas Day show. And she's like, I can't be there that quick. And she's like, well, don't take long to decide. We need you. I pulled a lot of strings for you. It's either yes or no. She's like, okay, I'll let you know. Then, of course, she holds the wreath necklace and stares off into space. She goes to her dad. She's like, Dad, from Family Ties, they offered my job back, and they're offering me a 3-year contract and a big raise, and they say that they made a mistake. And she's like, I don't know, the raise, this, that. And he's like, well, you're a wonderful talent. Like, of course they realized that they needed you. And she's like, but I'm torn. Like, my whole life has been building up to that show. And I'm like, what do you mean? You've already been doing it for 12 years. They treated you like trash.
Yeah, they'll probably fire you again somehow. They'll figure out a way.
Yes. And like, you have Chad Michael Murray now, and you're a choreographer. You have the biggest hit in Sycamore Creek. And he's like, well, when would you leave? And she's like, tomorrow night. He goes, well, you know, not for nothing, but you don't even seem excited. She goes, well, I was just looking forward to spending Christmas together. And what about the show? And he goes, look, you have given this place life again, okay? And we can keep the show alive. And you always wanted to be a jingle bell. She's like, true, true. And he goes, look, opportunities like this don't come along once in a lifetime, let alone twice. I'm like, what are you talking about? And then he says, now look, I don't want you to worry about this place. We will manage. There are more important things in your life, and you have to live for them. She's like, yeah. Then she texts Jody, okay, I'll take the job. That night, she sees Chad Michael Murray getting ready. And of course, he's full of energy, but he also notices that something's going on. And he asks a big question. What's going on? Something seems wrong. She goes, you know, we need to talk. I'm leaving permanently. She's like, or excuse me, he's like, what? She goes, well, the Jingle Bells offered me my job back, and I said yes. And he goes, wait, no, I'm confused, but I thought they hired somebody. And she's like, well, they did, but they changed their mind. You know, they're facing each other, and he takes the wreath necklace into his hand, and they're touching. And the guys start to walk in, and he's like, she's leaving us, all dramatic. She's like, yeah, I'm going to go back to the Jingle Bells. And they're like, what about our show? And she's like, you guys should be proud. You've done such an incredible job, and I have full faith in you, and the show is going to go on without me. Like, if I don't go now, I'll lose everything I worked for. And of course, Chad Michael Murray is like, well, what about what we worked for? And he storms out. And she's like, let me explain. He's like, you know what, Britt? For the first time since Amy left, I thought I found something worthwhile, and I did it for you, okay, and your family, because you had a passion and a drive that was so inspiring, it was almost impossible for me to not want to help you out. And now you're just going to leave me, and you didn't even give me a heads up. And she's like, well, and he's like, and you're supposed to be my friendly face.
Oh, he does have a point, I guess.
But also, it's like, you don't get to bully her. Okay?
I'm also like, go back to your job. Just
yes. Go back to the big city. Whatever. It's like, Chad Michael Murray, calm. This isn't about you.
Who's the diva now?
Thank you, Erica. So after he's like screaming about how she's his friendly face, she's like, that is what I want. But I got scared, and then it all happened so fast. And he's like, I was starting to fall for you, Britt. It's like, started? You've already in love with her. Shut up. But then, of course, she's like, what? So shocked by this statement. And then he drops this. Thank you for showing me who you really are. before I did. Whoa. Okay.
Devastating.
Calm down. Then she's like, you've got me all wrong. This might be your best performance yet. Then he walks off into the city like, how dare you? That night, she stares at the photo of them sitting on Santa's lap. Gross. And she tries to call him, but he doesn't pick up. And the next day, she's visiting her dad at the bar with her bags packed. And he's like, I love you, and don't worry about it. And her sister's like, don't let them push you around in the big city. And she's like, Chad Michael Murray won't even speak to me. She's all upset. And her sister's like, well, what did you do? And she's like, well, I tried to call him. And she's like, well, did you show up? Did you go after him? Like, what do you, try harder. She's like, I don't know. I think he doesn't want to talk to me. And I'm just in that moment right now where I'm realizing, like, I have really strong feelings for him. Like, I have really big feelings for him. And her sister's like, look, you're going to regret it if you don't tell him. She's like, what do you have to lose? Like, you need to tell him. She's like, I think you're right. And they walk out. And as they walk out of the bar, hiding under a table, fixing something, allegedly, is Chad Michael Murray, overhearing that entire conversation about her, quote, big feelings for Chad Michael Murray. And he sits back and he, like, kind of taps his head on the table like, damn it. God, I shouldn't have been screaming at her. She gets into the taxi and she's like, to the big city. The guys are practicing and already arguing about timing and booty shaking because, guys, they need Brett. Chad Michael Murray is like, let's focus, let's tighten up the cues, let's do this and that. And Roger's like, when did you become in charge? He's like, I became in charge when Brett left us. All emotional. And it's Christmas Eve, and they're all fighting, and they're all working, and Chad Michael Murray's in his head about Brett, and they can all see it. But they're like, look, we've got to do this for the family. We've got to do this for the rhythm room. That night, Britt, who's already been in the cab for seemingly 7 hours, who knows, unknown time, is stuck in traffic. And the cab driver is like, Christmas Eve sure is a busy time to travel. Lots of people, trying to get to the airport or whatever. Meanwhile, the show at the Rhythm Room has started. And there's flips and there's thrusting. And she's sitting at the cab, looking out the window, holding her wreath necklace like, Chad Michael Murray. And at the club, Chad Michael Murray emerges, but he can't bring himself to thrust like he normally does because he's flustered. He can't find his friendly face out of all these beautiful women in the crowd. And his eyes are darting around like, someone please, a friendly face that's hot and looks like Britt. When all of a sudden, Britt, who had been in a cab for 7 hours, somehow magically makes it within 30 seconds back into the Rhythm Room. And she's standing there. And all of a sudden, he rips through a wild stripper routine because he's so impacted by the hottest face in the room, Britt. He's so strong emotionally. The women go crazy for him. Britt runs to him. She goes, I couldn't get on the plane. I told Jody, no, I couldn't do it. I feel terrible that I dragged you into this thing and I didn't handle it correctly. And you're right, I should have told you. And he's like, I didn't think it was possible for this to become the most incredible thing that it ever was. But this dance review is the most amazing experience. And it's something, and you're something. And I don't think I could have done it. And I loved it. And not to mention, I met you. And I found my friendly face. And I didn't know I was looking for one. But I found you. And they kiss. She goes, what does this mean? You forgive me? And he goes, I'm thinking about it. And then he picks her up the only way a stripper can, and he kisses her again. The next day, it's Christmas Day. The rhythm room is closed for a private event. The family and the strippers are having dinner together. It's a big celebration. In walks the Shishi Lala landlord / slumlord. And even though her parents are the tenants, Britt walks up like she owns the MFing place and is like, here, bitch, and hands over a giant envelope of cash. $30,000 in ones from the stripper review.
It's a suitcase.
And she goes, every penny. And she hands it over and she's like, thank you. And she goes, and you know what? I owe you an apology. I underestimated you with what you could do, and you did it, and I'm so impressed. I'm like, didn't you literally say that on night one? Did you just copy and paste your I underestimated you? Was that a scene, Splice? And then Britt is like, I want you to know that you're also part of this family, and I want you to join us. And she's like, me? Slumlord? You want me to join you? And she's so honored. And she sits down, and that night they all walk out, and Chad Michael Murray is like, what's next? And she says, you know what? I don't know, but it'll be in Sycamore Creek. You know, I just wanted to be on that stage, but it doesn't matter unless you're surrounded by the people you love. And she's like, you're right. It's not performing that's important. It's who you perform for. And he's like, wow, that's really great advice. And she's like, yeah, it's from the Grand Ole Opry. Some random person said that to my dad backstage at the Rhythm Room years ago, and we say it to each other now. And then they hold hands, and he kisses her hand, and they look at this giant Christmas tree. And she tells him all of her favorite memories are about the Rhythm Room. She's like, what are your favorite memories? And he goes, this one. And then he kisses her.
Oh.
The end.
Ah. Oh my God.
And then we get the credits and surprise twist, bloopers, really whack bloopers of like not remembering their lines or like something falling or, you know, hip thrusting. Love a blooper moment.
That sounds like the best part of the movie.
Always is.
Honestly.
Can't deny a blooper moment. And as we said, barely a movie, barely conflict, barely conflict.
Barely. I feel like they missed an opportunity to put Dolly Parton in here somewhere.
Oh, would have died. Would have died.
Also, a ham on rye sounds really good.
Yeah. The Yule log that they make for 20 people, one single one looked really good. A single one.
The other business went bust because they put everything into that business.
Yeah.
You can only work on one small business at a time.
Yeah, because they only had 2 employees, the sister and Roger. Roger's the chef, and yet he was doing choreographed dances all day, practicing for the review. So something to think about. Well, Erica, thank you so much for being my guest. This was super fun.
Thank you for having me. I had so much fun.
Oh my God, it's so fun. Guys, as always, you can email me allspoilerrecap@gmail.com. Subscribe, leave a review, tell a friend. We're fully word of mouth, so I love when I hear that you've discovered the podcast. And of course, we'll continue on our Christmas journey as we make our way through the month of December and some surprises along the way as well. A big anniversary is coming up. I have a special edition of the All Spoiler Recap, which you're just going to have to tune in to find out. I'll let you know as we get closer. And of course, we'll see you on Mondays.